Yo, what's going on? Recently I've watched, and I would also recommend you check out a couple of Crit Cake's videos. He's kind of been doing some PTR warrior testing, and it doesn't look that great for us right now, honestly, damage numbers wise. I don't know how we're going to look in the raid overall, but Mythic Plus, we're definitely falling behind quite a bit compared to other classes. But regardless of that, that's not really the topic of the video. I just want to shout out Mr. Crit Cake. He's a cool guy. Check his videos out. But I want to ask, why do people not like arms? I've always seen and I've always heard people basically only really want to play Fury. There are some people that are arms diehards or PvPers that really like arms because of the value it provides, that kind of thing. But a lot of the time, when I speak to or see warriors talking about what they like to play, mostly it's just Fury. And a lot of them really don't like arms. And I think it's just because arms has a... And all of these are basically not talking about damage, right? Not talking about damage, not talking about damage profiles, execute, none of that shit. Just kind of how it plays. And one thing I think arms really has going against it right now, at least, is the way it's designed. You have a lot of buttons to press and play to really just kind of play your class efficiently, right? When we look at a class like Fury, and this is even less so for Slayer, but for Thane, we have, even if we're playing optimally, we have a Recklessness keybind, our cooldowns, a Ravager keybind, and then we just have our Bloodthirst, Raging Blow, Execute, Rampage. Like, we have our standard buttons, and then we have some utility, right? So we don't have a lot to press. We don't have a lot to play. We just come in here, we just do our normal shit. Alright. In the class, like, you're only hitting a couple buttons, right? If you need some utility, yeah, you can throw in a Shockwave, you know, you can throw in a Stormbolt if you need to. But, like, we have our kick, we have our mobility, we have our cooldowns, and we've got about, like, 3 or 4 buttons that we're kind of pressing. And for Thane, it's a little different, obviously, because we have Thunder Blast, which is also our Whirlwind generator for cleaving stuff. But it's pretty simple, right? It's simple, it's effective, it's fun to play. You're just going there, you meat grind. I will admit, and other people have been kind of talking about this lately as well, that Theory's been kind of stale, because it's been the same thing. They've tried to do some things, they've tried to change how much more we want to press stuff like Bloodthirst or Bloodbath by buffing those things. Reckless Abandon doesn't really change your playstyle, AM doesn't really change your playstyle. I don't mind a very simple playstyle, personally. It's a little stale, but it's something I like, right? It's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward. You hit the buttons, you do the damage. There are some different, like, little rule sets you can do to make things better for you. But realistically, you are just... You've got your cooldowns, and you've got your core 3 or 4 buttons that you're kind of pressing, right? But let's look over more towards arms. And this is going to be a bit excessive, because this is... because it is Colossus compared to Slayer, so it's got an extra button. But I feel like Warrior kind of is the simple, easy-to-play kind of class, but that kind of, like, melee, easy-to-play kind of class got taken up by Ret Paladin, in all honesty. That class is very easy, it's very straightforward, you have very few buttons, you have a lot of utility, right? Like, that class has a lot of utility, obviously, because it's a Paladin. It can heal, it can help, it can shield, it can bubble, stuff like that, right? Which makes sense for them. But for Warrior, all we do really is damage. We have some utility, but, like, basically, like, we just do damage. And I honestly don't know if Warriors want more utility, like, more buttons. Like, on my Shaman, I have an entire second row on my cooldown set here for, like, Poison Cleansing, Wind Rush, Healing Stream. You have all of your defensives. You have your Stone Bulwark, Astral Shift. Whatchamacallit? Your Rock Guy, your Earth Ellie. And on top of that, you have, like, Disease. Like, Shaman has a ton of utility to it, and just way more buttons. And I don't actually know if Warrior players want more buttons, which is kind of why I'm wondering why Warrior players don't really like arms. Arms is kind of clunky in and of itself, But let's take a look at Colossus and compare it to Fury. We popped our cooldowns, and we're just going, right? That's kind of how Fury works. You popped your cooldowns, and you're going. But what are we looking at for global cooldowns for arms just to play a pack? You have your Roar. My Roar is baked into my avatar because it's also a 1.5 CD. So you have your Roar global cooldown. You have your Warbreaker global cooldown. If you're playing Colossus, you have Demolish global cooldown. You have Ravager global cooldown, and you have Sweeping Strikes global cooldown. So to set up any of these pulls before you hitting any other buttons, right? And especially considering, like, in this AoE setup, Merciless Bone Grinder, it does damage during Ravager. So because of that, you have to cast Ravager last. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 setups of global, or 5 globals of setup. 6 if you count charging and thunderclapping first. So you have 6 globals to set up before you're actually playing your class and playing the game, right? Compared to Fury, which is you charge in, you pop your cooldowns, you're going. And I think that's why a lot of people actually don't like ARMS, because it has this setup period and because it just has too many random globals, right? I think Sweeping Strikes is something that should either go back to being passive or should be taken off the global cooldown. One of the reasons why I'm assuming things like Sweeping Strikes, things like Warbreak, or things like Colossus Smash, and these other abilities, right? Like, I imagine these two abilities, one of the reasons why they're kept as global cooldowns is because they want to keep them strong, and they want to be, when you choose to press this button, it's a meaningful choice, right? But if they made them off global cooldown, there's probably plenty of players that would just bake them into their cooldowns or into their buttons, so they would automatically cast while they're doing things, and they wouldn't think about them at all. Which, in some situations, would actually be optimal to have as little downtime as possible for these buttons. Most situations, it wouldn't really be optimal, especially considering the different things that Colossus Smash works with, and you have one to do setup, yada yada. But I think that's why people actually don't like ARMS very much, even though it is technically similar to Fury. Because if you look at you have your cooldowns, but outside of your cooldowns, you have what? You have Thunderclap. So you have Thunderclap, Slam, Execute, Overpower. Overpower, very important. Mortal Strike, very important. If you're playing any AoE, Cleave, very important. And that's it. So, like, it's still 4 or 5 buttons. It's still, like, the same. The playstyle is a little different with having Overpower, and you're mainly building rage through auto attacks compared to building rage through hitting your buttons, which is why it might feel kind of weird. But I think the main difference is because you're still, like I said, playing the same amount of buttons, really, is just the setup period and how clunky ARMS feels. And, like, if I'm going into this pack, right, so I'm going to pre-Sweeping Strikes, charge in, so I'm going to charge in Thunderclap, Sweeping Strikes, Avatar Roar, Colossus Smash, Demolish, Ravager, then I can start my normal rotation and start cleaving. So it'll look like this. And I am playing Blade Masters Torment, so I do get more cleaves in this setup, but, like, the amount of setup required takes way longer to play. There's also a problem currently with how this class functions in single target, and that's Skullsplitter as a button. Personally, this adds just another button to your regular rotation, so then you go up to, like, 6. Skullsplitter I really don't like. This talent had to be buffed. I was originally actually kind of good in burst AoE situations where it would actually drain the rest of your rend and deep wounds for a kind of quick burst of damage, and had some interesting applications in places like, it wasn't Neltharis, it was the Legion. Was the Legion dungeon also called Neltharis, man? Legion. Neltharian's Lair. So, like, if you needed to burst down the totems really quickly on the totem boss, that kind of thing, it had some interesting applications. Like, I think we ran it on Senarth so we could kill the spider as fast as possible, stuff like that. But this class just has a lot of weird ideas thrown into it. One of the reasons why I personally don't like Ret Paladin is I feel like a lot of good ideas that could potentially be more warrior-like were just given to Ret Paladin because it is a far more played class. That is hard copium, and probably not true for 99% of things, but that's just something that's popped in my head before. But Skullsplitter, I think, is a terrible button. It's not satisfying to press. It's not interesting. It just makes your bleeds tick out more. It's just like a rage generator button because they killed a lot of the rage we got through Warlord's Torment, giving us recklessness through Colossus Smash. But why does a button, like, you see literally even the icon is a axe chopping through a skull, like doing so much damage it's chopping through a skull. Why is a button that is supposed to be a literal helm splitter type attack that goes through armor and breaks through someone's skull just make them bleed a little more, right? Like, the class just fundamentally does not feel very, very good. The extra buttons it has does not feel very good. Unhinged was a really awesome addition. Like, Hurricane was kind of a problem. So Unhinged being an addition is actually... I like Unhinged quite a bit. But this class is just way more... If I had to say, annoying to play. Like, it's not hard to play ARMS. It is just way more annoying to play. Because you just have... Because it's just a bunch of buff upkeeps, and then you're buffing your Mortal Strike. Like... I don't know. I really think that Fury probably needs some kind of rework in general, because I think its design is kind of stale and boring and a little outdated. One thing I would honestly like to see for Fury is, instead of having Whirlwind and having to hit Whirlwind to spread your cleave, me personally, what I would like to see from Fury is almost like a Slams style of gameplay, like when you think about Diablo or you think PoE or something, where you can like hit the ground and it just does this big shatter of damage in a large area, right? I think that you can still use stuff like Rampage and Raging Blow and Bloodthirst and things like that. However, what I would like the class to be instead, Slams-wise, is without having to press Whirlwind to make the class function and cleave, I think the class thematically should literally hit somebody so hard that you ever watch like an animated fight, or even in some animes where like they'll clash, like they'll block an attack and they'll clash, and the hit will be so hard that the ground underneath them will like break and shatter, shit like that. That's what I think Fury Warrior should more go to where I honestly think we need to move away from Whirlwind as in general. Like, it's kind of cool. I mean, it interacts with like Thane, but even Thunderclap. Like, Thunderclap's way more iconic than something like Whirlwind compared to what it used to be. But I'd honestly rather just have these Whirlwind talents gone, and then when you press your spenders, they just do a hit so big that it just AoEs everything in the area of your primary target. And that would flow way better. You wouldn't have to hit Whirlwind every 1 in 4 globals, even though it does generate a good amount of rage for us. It'd definitely be more in rework territory, to where we might need, depending on how our spenders work. Like, right now, Execute, which is a warrior, like, mainstay. Like, you do not have warrior without Execute. That's how cool this button is, how cool this ability is. They built Condemn, an entire Covenant ability, around Execute, because it is so pinnacle for warrior. Imagine if, for Execute, for Fury, instead of gaining rage, it spent it in like Rampage, where Rampage would do a bunch of hits and then break the ground and do damage around your primary target. Execute, you would chunk up, slam into the guy in that anime style, where the ground breaks out and it does damage to everything around you, would just absolutely fucking crush and do a ton of damage. Would feel really, really cool and be really, really awesome for Fury. And it would also bring more cadence to having stuff like Sudden Doom. Sudden Doom is going to be required for Slayer moving forward because of how they want it to function. But then it would make Sudden Doom even cooler. When you got a Sudden Doom proc, you got this fucking big boom and slam, and like, I think Warrior needs, or at least Fury needs to move towards that slam style of gameplay. And it also needs to have its target cap, I think, moved up from 5 targets to either just 8, or with that kind of slams mentality kind of thing, 8 and beyond. Because if you want to imagine it like thematically, you hit something so hard that it does like a wave of damage out from the primary target. And then from that target, as it hits more targets, the wave gets less and less and less. So you could say, oh, the shock wave dissipates as it hits more targets. So it can be beyond 8 targets or beyond 5 targets, right? You can thematically like put it that direction. But the way it is currently is just kind of... But the way it is currently is very simple, and I really think it needs more flavor. And I think Fury as that slam style of gameplay really would work very well. But moving back over to ARMS, because this is supposed to be an ARMS video, the ARMS' focus on bleeds more so than anything, I think is pretty lame. Martial Prowess, I think, has the right idea, right? I think Martial Prowess has the right idea, and I think the idea of potentially building up stacks of weakness on the target, or like chipped armor or something like that, to where you're doing more damage to the target in small windows. Like Colossus Smash originally just removed your target's armor. Like that's what it was. It wasn't a damage amp. It just removed your target's armor. So you were doing more damage to them. And I think that was the right direction, and they should have kept it instead of just being flat damage increase. I do wonder if ARMS' prevalence in PvP and the reduction of armor made it a bit potentially oppressive towards cloth classes, or even other like leather or mail classes with armor reduction. So maybe armor reduction isn't the right way to go about it in terms like balance wise. But I do think that the style of gameplay where you see ARMS, or at least I see ARMS as more of like a tactician in combat, right? I mean, they even have the spell, or the thing, Depth Experience, and our main thing that works is like this fits the class together as tactician, right? Currently our martial prowess increases the damage of our mortal strike and cleave. Maybe it could like increase the damage of your next spender, or you can build up different or you can build using different attacks. Like imagine I don't want to bring back like Sunder armor or anything, but imagine if Slam was more like Sunder armor, where while you're in your rotation, you're also kind of buffing your Mortal Strike or your Cleave or your Execute or whatever, and you're breaking off pieces of armor, you're leaving it, anything's exposed. I mean, the whole exposure is might be more of like an assassination rogue kind of thing. I'm just trying to reach for something that's like, I don't want to say ARMS should be like my idea of Fury, where it's kind of slams. Like imagine if ARMS, because Fury's because a lot of Fury's damage has to dealing with like hitting with 2 weapons. That's where like the damage comes from. Like imagine a spell like Upheaval from Diablo, to where you just put your weapon in the ground and actually just, and literally the amount of damage that you're doing is in this big area because you're so strong that you're using just your weapon to break apart the earth and make a fucking shockwave and shit. Like that's why we have the ability shockwave. Like I don't know if it necessarily needs to be, it could be like a different flavor of slam, but I do think ARMS might benefit from something like that, to where it's, you can take inspirations from like Diablo or PoE for like a two-handed melee class and really get some cool and interesting things in there. Like Leap Slam is a cool thing from PoE. It's mainly used for mobility, right? But imagine if instead of heroic leap, like it was replaced with like a Leap Slam just for ARMS, because ARMS has the using just one weapon, so there's some flavor to add there. Like, there's definitely some flavor to add to this class. And honestly, I think where, in terms of reworks are concerned, what needs to happen is adding some form of element to these classes, right? Like, Fury could have, like imagine Fury is like Earth and Fire, to where we have Odin's Fury, the Gift of Odin, right? That does some fire, like a little bit of fire damage. The Slam and the Shockwave can do like either sonic or maybe not nature, maybe you can do sonic damage. just to add some feel to that. Maybe arms could have some of the like that upheaval kind of thing. Could have nature damage or sonic damage through that and be thematic. Man, I am way off track of why people don't like Arms Warrior. I'm just way off track, man. It's bad. It's a problem. I get to yapping, and then my ideas go boop, 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 and then I'm everything. So let's get back on track, really. I just think that Arms... I think, basically, the TLDR is, I think Arms is very clunky, right? I think it requires too many globals of setup. Upkeeping Rend, like... I think Rend is there because it's been there since the beginning. I don't really think anybody sees Arms Warrior and goes, yeah, bleeds! Like, I think it's fine if it's there. I do like that it can do additional damage. I do think that in terms of, like, PvP, leaving a bleed on the enemy, and then them being able to break out of stealth because of the bleed, like, there's that kind of application. But I kind of... Like, Cold Steel Hot Blood's kind of cool. I mean, it's pretty useful in a lot of situations. So, like, I don't think bleeds are something necessarily that Warriors should move away from, but I'm just moving off topic again, bro. I'm just moving off topic again. Arms is just too clunky, man. Like, I think Sweeping Strikes needs to go back to being a passive. Because here's the problem. If you make Sweeping Strikes and off the global, it's just going to get macroed in. It's just going to get macroed in. It might be less efficient than not, but people just don't want to press the button, right? People just don't want to press the button. One of the reasons why I think people don't like Demolish is not only is it basically Fear Laugh 2.0, and we spent a long time dealing with that, and the bad memories of trying to get Fear Laugh and just being behind every other class because we were balanced around a legendary that we couldn't get. Don't get me started. Is that it's just another button as well. Not to mention, I think one of the problems of, especially Colossus, is that Bladestorm feels like a very good and very strong button to press as Slayer, especially with Unhinged. But with Colossus, your Demolish desyncs all the time. With AM, your Ravager desyncs all the time. Your Warbreaker's coming off a different kind of cooldown because they all have different kind of CDs. If you play everything correctly, right? Like, your Warbreaker would come off cooldown as your Ravager is coming off cooldown on its second application, if everything's running full uptime smoothly. So, it, like, on paper, it runs well and everything makes sense and it's all combined. But in reality, I think the problem with Arms is realistically that it's very clunky. There's a lot of setup. There's a lot of annoyance to it. They have tried to make it way simpler for us by taking power out of things like Overpower and Dreadnought and buffing base abilities like Mortal Strike and Cleave to be things that you want to always press, right? So it's like, oh, it's very simple. I press Cleave and AoE, Mortal Strike and Single Target, like very, very simple, right? And that's kind of the way they're working towards and what they want. But I just feel it is, unfortunately, especially cooldowns wise, just way too clunky of a spec. So yeah. Anyway, I just want to talk about my annoyance about playing Arms, because we're probably going to be playing Arms a lot in this next upcoming tier. Slayer Arms is a bit more straightforward. It will have more RNG associated with it based on if you can keep up your Ashen Juggernaut procs. That will be a pretty big damage difference between pulls, which is going to be annoying. However, I think that next tier is looking good. It's looking like a lot of fun. I'm sure the balance team will do what they need to do. But I think I think Fury is okay, but it's pretty stale right now. Arms, I think, definitely needs a full rework for sure. Like, if they were going to target one of the two, I'd rather them target Arms for a full rework. But I really do think that they should look into that, like, Slam style, not necessarily of gameplay, but of some kind of inspiration with the class. Because it feels like the reason why Arms has so many bleeds and we're working with bleeds compared to everything else is that maybe they don't feel like the class is allowed to be, like, magically tuned. I don't know. Maybe they don't feel like it should be fiery based or or earth-based, you know, or sonic, some kind of interesting, not just physical damage type. Because you look at other classes that are more bleeds and poisons, like Assassination Rogue, you have like Feral Druid. But yeah, I could probably just continue to talk in circles for hours, so I'm going to end it here. But TLDR, I've said TLDR, I think 4 times now, that they just need to make the spec less clunky. I think I think these cooldowns, some of them, like at least Sweeping Strikes, this needs to just go passive or something. Nobody likes pressing this button. They even double down with Sweeping Strikes with Blade Master's Torment, but nobody likes pressing the button, so like, I don't know, man. It is a weird situation. Also, our Torments are bad. Dude, right now, in terms of what our tree looks like our talent tree looks like oh my god, I can't, like, it basically looks like this, man. Like, our capstones for Fury and Arm, like, our capstones outside of, like, the Unhinged capstone is so bad in most situations. Like, Executioner's Precision is good, and, like, this is good. Fatality is thankfully getting a buff, but, like, the Warrior capstones just suck. Like, every other class, you get one of these capstones, and you go, oh shit, this is great. But for Warrior, on the PTR at least right now, these capstones are terrible. They're not good. They're not, like, they don't feel good. They don't change anything. They're not interesting. So I really like our whole capstone set in general for Fury and Arms to take a look at. Well, there's another 2 minutes of rambling and not talking about arms. Okay. All right. The video must end. I have been yapping too much. Okay. Bye-bye.